This is the land that has sustained the people of Vietnam for more than 2,000 years. 95 out of every 100 people in this country are peasants, living close to the soil. North Vietnam is small, about 1/26th the size of the United States. Here, living in harmony with each other, are Buddhists, Catholics, Chinese, primitive mountain tribesmen, Cambodians, Thais. Under the French, most of the land in North Vietnam was owned by landlords. Today, there is no privately owned land and all farming is done cooperatively. Fishing also is now a cooperative enterprise. The people in the fishing villages along the shore have pooled their boats and resources, and the work is done collectively. Even in the larger towns built during the French occupation, the pace of life is slow. On March the 2nd, 1965, as an extension of the war in the South, the United States began a daily 2 years ago, this city was a bustling, thriving city of 90,000 people, mostly textile workers. Today, it is desolate and forlorn, and much of it is a shambles. The officials here tell me that the city has been bombed 59 times, 30 of these attacks being at night. I have no way of verifying these figures, but there is really no need to, for the evidence of great destruction is all around. "75% of the city has been destroyed. When it became clear that the city was a major target, most of the people were evacuated to the country. In the parts of the city still standing, the stores were closed, the streets were deserted. On April the 26th, 1965, the United States Secretary of Defense attempted to assure an increasingly disturbed American public that civilians were not being bombed. Each target, he said, was chosen only after a careful review of reconnaissance photographs to ensure that it was isolated and apart from urban populations. I found the reality different. Towns whose names Americans have never heard of have been bombed until they were reduced to rubble. Fat Diem, bombed 50 times, totally destroyed. Phu Li, bombed 40 times, totally destroyed. Ninh Binh, bombed 120 times, totally destroyed. Than Hoa, bombed over 200 times, totally destroyed. The list could go on. Apart from Hanoi and Haiphong, city life in North Vietnam has ceased to exist. On the small country of Vietnam, United States planes have dropped a greater tonnage of bombs than they dropped on Nazi Germany in all of World War II. Three days before I was in this village, it was bombed. The village isn't much more than a collection of mud and bamboo huts. Over the hamlet there hung an atmosphere of shock and bewilderment. The children were gathered silently, in groups. I could find nothing in the village or around it that could even remotely be considered a military target. This is Mr. Van Teo, one of the villagers. The white band on his child's head is a sign of mourning. I asked Mr. Van Teo whether he would tell me what had happened.
Đế quốc Mỹ như tội ác của đế quốc Mỹ thì nó cũng có nhiều tội ác.
Salt bed some distance away.
Và trong đó có bố mẹ già, thế sau đó giặc Mỹ sẽ tới lần thứ
He
hai.
told me that the papers on the sticks indicated where the destroyed homes had stood.
Trong đó có
They have on them the names of the families who had lived there.
vợ tôi và con tôi, và từ đứa trẻ con chưa được lọt lòng mẹ cũng đã bị chúng nó giết hại.
His two daughters were able to jump into a small air raid shelter, but his wife and small boy were killed.
Nhất định là
What, he said, have we ever done to the American people, that they should send their bombers to kill our women and children?
Phải khuất đầu chịu mùi súng trước mùi súng của nhân dân Việt Nam, và nhân dân Việt Nam là một nhân dân anh hùng, một mảnh đất Việt Nam này là một mảnh đất anh hùng. Nhưng tên đế quốc Mỹ đến đây xâm phạm, nhân dân chúng tôi quyết tâm đứng dậy để tiêu diệt chúng nó.
Việt Nam anh hùng cùng lên sông Hoa vượt qua bão tố, thề kêu lấy nước nhà, thề đi sinh đến cùng, đường hồn tung không khơi, hoàn nhớ đến hồi bình minh cho đời, thầy còn nước lên lòng.
Cứ mở mắt.
Hồ Chủ tịch,
A unit of the regular army.
đoàn kết với Việt Nam.
There's no conscription in North Vietnam.
Hà Nội ngày 20 tháng 3 năm
All soldiers are volunteers.
Ủy ban cứu nước.
And behind the army, there's a whole nation at arms.
Đâm thẳng, đâm. Một bước, tiến. Đâm thẳng.
This, then, is a people's war. The total mobilization of all human and material resources. The old, the young, the peasants and the workers, all are ready to fight and die in defense of their country.
Chuẩn bị.
Every factory, every village has its militia unit.
Đâm. Thôi.
Even in remote mountain areas, the peasants are trained not only to resist the bombing attacks, but for guerrilla war, should the United States land an invasion force.
Cúi đầu xuống. Sát gần vào. Sát hẳn xuống đất. Cấp tốc. Nhưng khom xuống. Cả đầu lẫn vai. Gần sát vào. Sát hẳn xuống đất.
When a plane is hit, pilots are sometimes captured. Sometimes not. This is a small village northwest of Hanoi. In a recent raid, United States planes dropped high explosive and anti-personnel bombs both on the village itself and on the peasants who were working in the rice fields. Many children and women workers were killed. A Japanese War Crimes Commission was to visit the village, and so the peasants placed a marker where each of the small anti-personnel bombs had fallen. The larger craters made by the high explosive bombs required no marking. Peasants from neighboring villages were helping to rebuild some of the destroyed huts. On a platform in a tree, a girl kept watch for bombing planes.
Xã ta như thế là coi như là đội 3 năm nay vẫn giữ
Sản lượng cao trong năm 66 đấy.
nghệ của mình là nghệ thủ công, không có gió thì đánh mà cái gió là tốt cho mình.
Cho nên á là
Later in the day, in the open courtyard where the villagers dry their rice at harvest time, a meeting was called to discuss the serious problems brought on by the war. Meetings such as this are held from time to time in all the villages of North Vietnam.
mà ruộng trũng thì ta sẽ gạn đi. Cái thứ hai nữa là về vấn đề phân bón, tức là 5 tấn một công mẫu, thì muốn đạt được 5 tấn một công mẫu ấy thì như thế là chúng ta phải tất cả các cái đơn vị là các đội á là chúng ta làm thế nào.
This village leader, who is elected by the villagers, is telling the people that at harvest time, a meeting was called to discuss the serious problems brought on by the war. Meetings such as this are held from time to time in all the villages of North Vietnam.
Mà ruộng trũng thì ta sẽ gạn đi. Cái thứ hai nữa là về vấn đề phân bón, tức là 5 tấn một công mẫu, thì muốn đạt được 5 tấn một công mẫu ấy thì như thế là chúng ta phải tất cả các cái đơn vị là các đội á là chúng ta làm thế nào.
This village leader, who is elected by the villagers, is telling the people that to defeat the most powerful nation in the world, they will have to fight on 3 fronts. They must defend themselves against air attacks, they must keep up food production, and they must help to repair the roads and bridges after bombing attacks.
Đúng cái quy cách mà chúng ta đã định, rồi là bắn cả vào nàng mà. Do đấy mà bây giờ chúng ta làm thế nào là chúng ta phải quyết tâm. Còn ở ngoài đường giao thông, đấy là nói về công tác sản xuất và công tác chiến đấu thì như thế. Thế song song cái vấn đề mà đó thì chúng ta tiến hành là cái công tác bổ túc văn hóa.
Bridges in North Vietnam are one of the main targets. This bridge was first hit 6 months ago. Yesterday, it was bombed again. It wasn't hit. One only occasionally sees a piece of modern machinery in North Vietnam, usually imported from the Soviet Union or China. Equipment such as this could be destroyed by a single bomb. But most of the work in North Vietnam is done this way without machinery, as they are doing in this irrigation ditch. How many bombs will it take to destroy all the people in Vietnam who still work with their hands? There are a few electric pumping stations in North Vietnam. An installation like this could be destroyed in a single bombing raid. But how many bombs will it take to destroy the tens of thousands of people who move rivers with their hands? The Vietnamese have never known modern technology and so have never become dependent on it. They don't rely on machinery, They rely on their own ingenuity, their muscle, and their spirit of determination. This is the answer to the paradox of how a very small country can successfully resist the richest and strongest nation in the world. Of the Volunteer Youth Brigade. The brigade has enlisted about 100,000 boys and girls. Most of them are between 16 and 22, who have volunteered for this work for 3 years. They don't get any pay. They don't even get vacations. Their work is hard and very dangerous, for planes frequently attack them while they're at work. They're divided into units of about 200 that are stationed at intervals near the railroad. I was staying with a unit of the Youth Brigade in a small village in Thanh Hoa province, about 4 kilometers from the rail line. In the early morning, a section of the line received some direct hits, and I went with the Volunteer Youth Brigade when they went to repair it. Bomb missed us by about 400 yards, too close for my comfort. But these incidents have become so common that everyone seems to take them as a part of normal existence. This is the port of Haiphong. As ports go, it's a small one, but to it come ships from almost all parts of the world. From the Soviet Union, from China, from France and Britain and Germany, from Poland and Cyprus and a dozen other countries. Through this port comes grain and military equipment and the steel to repair the broken bridges. When I was there, this port hadn't yet been bombed. But no one in Haiphong expected that to last. Everyone I talked to felt sure that sooner or later the port would be destroyed. The authorities told me that alternative methods of unloading ships have already been prepared. The war, in many ways, has had a liberating effect upon the women. Through sheer necessity, old, inhibiting customs have been broken. Formerly, young women of the... Even the small workshops which have been evacuated from the bombed cities to the country are now operated by women. Many textile factories have been destroyed. Some are still in operation. The war is never far away. The young people in North Vietnam are urged to follow what they call the 3 postponements. While the war is on, they are asked to postpone falling in love. If they're already in love, they are asked to postpone marrying. And if they're already married, to postpone having children. It doesn't always work. With a number of women now at work, hundreds of additional nursery schools have sprung up to take care of the children. I asked one of the factory workers whether I could see what her living quarters were like. She told me, with a note of pride in her voice, that her husband was away in the army. This mother told me that meat was very scarce, but that the rice ration was adequate and that usually there was a good supply of fish and vegetables. For many, even when night comes, the day's work is not over. These adults had no schooling when they were children. Under the French, only 2 children out of every 100 had any education. Now almost every village in the country has its little school. Night classes such as this one were established, at first to teach adults how to read and write, and then to give them more advanced education. And the workers of North Vietnam had no access to modern medicine. Following liberation from the French, one of the first things the Vietnamese in the North did was to set up a national medical service. Intensive training of doctors and nurses was begun. In thousands of small towns and villages, clinics were established. Special hospitals were built for the treatment of cholera, tuberculosis, and trachoma, an eye disease very prevalent in Vietnam. For the first time, the Vietnamese began to make their own medicines and serums. As a result of all these developments, there has been a spectacular improvement in the general health of the people. The basis for the spreading network of medical services were the large hospitals set up in each of the provinces. Today, all but 2 of the new hospitals, one in Hanoi and one in Haiphong, have been destroyed by United States bombs. Were these errors, accidental bombings, or is the United States following its own Air Force manual, issued in 1966, which says that any person, thing, or location is a legitimate target if it helps to destroy the will of the enemy to resist? At the Hanoi Surgical Hospital, I had a talk with Dr. Han. She told me that the medical work that was formerly done in the hospitals that have been destroyed is now done in small hospitals scattered through the villages and hamlets, Dr. Hai, I wonder if you have any statistical information that you could give us which would show either an improvement or a regression of the medical health of your people.
Yes. We haven't had a case of cholera since 1956. Typhoid fever, typhus, and diphtheria have virtually disappeared. Infant mortality has dropped from 30% under the French to 2.4% at present. The incidence of tuberculosis has dropped from 25 cases per thousand of the population to 1.6%.
Dr. Hai, everybody that I've met in North Vietnam is extraordinarily optimistic as to the outcome of this war. Do your people really have any grasp of the enormous military power of the United States? How realistic do you think this confidence is?
Everyone knows that the United States is a rich and strong country.
My interview with Dr. Han was interrupted by an air raid alarm. "4 miles away, in the same heavily bombed area, children from the destroyed city of Than Hoa attend their evacuated school. In this province, when I was there, United States planes were overhead constantly, and the people would have to run to their shelters 8 or 10 times a day. The first class of the day is instruction in first aid. Several children had gone to a village hospital to be trained and are now teaching the other children what they learned. Philosopher, military strategist, and revolutionary. He is the symbol of his people's passionate desire for independence from foreign rule. Almost 50 years ago, at the Versailles Conference following World War I, Ho first demanded freedom for his nation from the French. In the half-century since then, he has never stopped fighting for it. Today, nearly 80 years of age, Ho Chi Minh often travels to the country villages to meet his people. They always speak of him as Uncle Ho. Meetings like this are common.
Rất tự hào, bác yêu quý lại đây thăm chúng ta. Bác sẽ thấy chúng ta đã chuẩn bị sẵn sàng bất kể vật gì mà chiến tranh cần dùng. Chúng ta sẽ tuân theo bác trong sự nghiệp đấu tranh giải phóng.
Everywhere, Ho has the same message of encouragement for his people. He is telling these villagers that sooner or later, Vietnam will win its independence and have peace. North and South will once more be united. He is telling the people that the various declarations of the government could all be summed up in 3 simple words. Yankee, go home.
Ôi xuân tan máu đời lòng ngàn tổ ngát trời, sông núi bao nhiêu năm trái trời, để yêu lòng cùng trang, để trở thành vinh quang, thúc giục thằng ta tung phong đi đưa, thủ vai sát vai chung một bóng cờ, cùng lên nhân dân Việt Nam anh hùng, cùng lên tung qua Việt Nam anh hùng, cùng lên tung qua vượt qua bão bùng, thề kêu lấy nước nhà, thề hy sinh đến cùng, cầm gươm ôm số